So Neil, generally a busy week, and thanks Neil for contributing every single week. It's great that you are happy to share things. So generally a busy week, projects completed, good progress made, new jobs picked up, new leads coming in too, led to one of our milestone goals from May to July looking like they'll be achieved. Great, well done, and great on the progress. Paul, talking to customers, it seems more than a few are expecting to start work around mid-May. Has anyone else had any feedback on when the world of work will start up again? That's a good question, and talk about that in a minute. And Alan, as well as continuing with the strategic plan, have enjoyed reading Business for Punks about Brewdog. Yeah, that's not a book that I've actually read, so I'd be interested in feedback on that, Alan. That's interesting. Amazing how many business books people are reading. There's a great book coming out on the 28th of April, so next week, from one of my favorite authors, Mike Michalowicz, which is called Fix This Next, which really is about identifying what you need to work on your business right now. Mike, good to have you here today. Just picking up on what Paul said, and Paul, if you want to take yourself off of mute, please feel free to do so. It's interesting. Certainly in the last couple of days, I've seen two things happen. You remember I talked about the sort of behavior curve, and we looked at the Kubler-Ross curve a few sessions ago. And what I'm seeing is some people are going back down from decision and experimenting and going back down into depression. They're getting worried, they're getting anxious. Quite a few people are being turned down for the business loans that are available. I've not actually spoken to anybody yet, and I'd be interested if anybody on this has actually had a yes from a bank. But at the moment, people are either still in the long queue, still being processed, but I've spoken to quite a few people who have been turned down, and there generally tends to be a little bit of a theme going off with people who have been turned down, where they're just point blankly being told, no, your business isn't viable. So just when a business is down on the floor, along come the banks and give us all a bit of a kick in and tell us that we don't have a good business and a good business model, without really knowing all about our business. And a lot of these people are not even in roles that they would normally be in. So it's really, I know it's difficult for them, but it's also difficult for businesses to hear that. So Paul, I'm seeing people very much in that state of anxiety again, uncertainty, and looking at the bank and wondering how long it's going to last. There are other people on the other side, and of course there's a third set which are doing well and getting good leads coming in, etc. But what I am seeing for those people who have perhaps completely stopped or near stopped, that there certainly are some shoots. I've got a client who's heading down to London today to look at a construction project that starts on the 18th of May. And I'm hearing more and more people. I was talking to a couple on a Zoom session earlier this morning, and they're being told that project is going to start on, I think it's the 20th of May, something like that. So there certainly are people who actually aren't just saying mid-May, but there are some people who are setting dates for that. But they do tend to be industries which aren't in complete lockdown now. So it might be construction, it might be manufacturing. It's interesting, somebody mentioned, I don't know how true this is, and I haven't had time to check it, but some people have mentioned that some of the big food chains, McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, are reopening up their takeaways as well. So I think there's definitely a sign there. Paul, you've taken yourself off mute. Tell us a little bit more about what people have said to you and what you've heard.
Yeah, well, it's actually quite interesting what you're just saying there about the fast food side of things, because I had a conversation with a catering company, because we deal a lot with collection of catering equipment for disposal. Excuse me. And he was saying that he has just had an email this morning from KFC saying that they've successfully trialed delivery out of several stores around the UK, and then their aim by in the next week is to get 800 stores around the UK up and running, but on a delivery only model. So apparently, what the big issue that a lot of the fast food places had was the actual layout of the kitchens wouldn't allow the social distancing, but KFC have reworked their kitchens so they can still do the social distancing within the restaurant and then just do deliveries. And several other companies I've spoke to seem to be expecting to have engineers and work coming back into them as of sort of mid-May. And I didn't know if that was just in my sort of sector of people, but equally people, like you were saying as well, are fluctuating. One day they're really pessimistic that nothing's going to happen, and nothing's going to happen in 3 weeks' time, and the next something's happened, and they've gone, oh well, actually, yes, no, there's a glimmer of light there, and I think that's what we're starting to see.
Yeah, and I think one thing we can be certain of is uncertainty in this. And Alan has put there again. Alan is an architect. We have contractors opening a site for a block of student accommodation next week. The other thing that I'm seeing, Paul, as you mentioned there, people are finding different ways of working. And what I'm also seeing is a lot of them are coming to a grinding halt because they can't get the supplies. So a lot of construction companies actually are still working, but they're running out of materials on site. And a lot of the builders merchants, for probably a similar reason to what you mentioned with the KFC there, they couldn't find a way of working in their yards that enabled social distancing. But what they are starting to do is they have been behind the scenes creating new ways of working, and they've been spending time on this, and I think they are finding ways around it. Interesting as well, and I might be politically incorrect by saying this, and we'll make a start in a moment formally, but I was talking to a coach that I work with over in the States, and I was asking him about the lockdown, and he's in Georgia, the state of Georgia, and they don't really have a lockdown like we have. It's a voluntary lockdown, a little bit like what we had before Boris announced the full lockdown, but people have decided to shut their businesses down, and certain businesses have been recommended to close down. But what they are doing is now they're recommending the businesses that should be opening. And I think this is what we will start to see. And there was a bit of a glimmer of this in the presentation yesterday, that I think what we'll do is we'll get more recommendations of who should be getting back to normal. And ironically enough, the governor of Georgia, just to share a little bit of funniness about it, has the first set of businesses that he has recommended that will open and should be open, all of them, on Monday, are barbers, hairdressers, and massage parlours. So I can't think of three more contact-driven businesses where you certainly can't social distance if you're going to cut somebody's hair, or particularly carry out a massage. I don't know how that's going to work, but apparently they have guidelines for working, and they're probably going to be dressed in PPE. I don't know, but yeah. And the Monday after is bars and restaurants. So they are looking at getting those two lumps of people back quite quickly, and their schools haven't closed down yet anyway. So I think it will be more by recommendation, and I agree with what you said there, Paul. Middle of May, people are, I think, realizing that there's going to be some shoots coming. The difficulty is for a lot of businesses, it's the time lag then between businesses opening and, if you're doing work with that sector, getting the work in. And that I think the time lag is going to be the thing that's going to cause a few people the problems there. Right, we'll make a formal start. Welcome to today's Crisis Productivity Programme webinar, which of course is part of the Productivity Programme and supported by the University of Lincoln and the ERDF funding. As I mention every single time, and I know Charlotte is probably on this call as well, but there are lots of different streams and lots of different things of support that you can get from the productivity program. And as we get into the end of my series here, I just want to remind you that there is a set of grant funding, academic expertise, graduate internships, specialist advisor support, and business angel network. And as we do get these shoots and we start looking at how we can work with graduates and how we can access the funding, etc., that's on that sheet there, it's really important to start talking to people about that now, because not only is there going to be a timeline and a time lag of work coming in, a lot of people are going to be accessing these kind of funds. A lot of people are going to be taking the benefit of things like this. So if you're thinking about doing something and you're thinking about doing it in the future, start investigating it now. Start finding out what is available now. And I think Paul is the person that you can speak to at the productivity program. And as always, I'll put their contact details at the bottom there. So really important to make access available to you and your business through the other things that are available through the productivity program. Today, we're going to do the usual thing of talking through hot topics, answer any questions that you might have. So please keep the questions coming in the questions and answers box. If there's anything you want to share in there, please type it in there as well. Going to talk, as usual, on 3 areas: effective team management, and this follows on from what we talked about last week, particularly some of the leadership items as well. I'm going to talk about plan B, C, and D. What I've been finding in the past week is that people have been working on their strategic plans, they've been working on their milestone plans and what they need to work on right now. But quite a few people have asked me, is it wrong to have a plan B? Is it wrong to have a plan C? So I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail later. And of course, I'm going to be focusing on how we can plan for improvements in productivity and improvements in efficiency in our businesses right now. Because whilst we're in this stage as we are, as we start to see those shoots, whether they're middle of May or further beyond or even closer right now, now is a good time to look at productivity and efficiency and start to put some plans into place. I want to mention another webinar that's coming up. There's 3 webinars. The first one is next Thursday, the 30th of April, and this is led by a good friend of mine, and he is Distract's Managing Director, Peter Watson, and these are about marketing in a crisis. And I know I've mentioned this before, but one of the things that tends to get cut first is marketing. When people are looking at costs, when people are looking at sort of battening down the hatches, marketing is usually one of the first things that gets just unanimously cut from the business. And I always say that's a bad thing. You need to market your way out of a crisis. And I think the series of webinars that are going to be held by Distract are really, really useful and going to be really, really important. And you can look at those and register for those. You probably already had an email, but certainly worth registering for those. And I'm certainly going to be on the one next week as well. So get yourselves on that. And there's going to be some other specialist aspects of that from the HR and the advertising team as well from Tom. 45-minute session, 30-minute presentation. So it's going to be pretty intense. These guys move at a pretty intense speed, and then 15 minutes of Q&A that you can ask through as well. So strongly recommend that you sign up for that. I think they've already had about 75 sign up for that. So that's good as well. As I mentioned, any questions, any hot topics? Before I get into the content, I want to see if anybody has got any initial questions. So please, if there's anything you want to ask, if there's anything that you want just to talk about and bounce around, happy to spend 3 or 4 minutes on that before we get started. Just type it in to the questions and answers box. I know the start of the webinars are always a little bit slow, getting the mind matter going, getting used to the format of the webinar. So I'm happy to answer any questions. So type them into the questions box now. That would be great. If the answer is no questions, That's not a problem, but please think about questions as you go along. And as we go through the topics, if there's anything that you want to ask, don't wait until the end. Put the questions in the questions box and I'll answer the questions as we go through if it's appropriate. I know some of you need a little bit of time to type in, so I'll let you carry on with that. Okay, moving on to effective team management. And this is a slide, and it's the exact images that I put up last week. And the reason I've put exactly the same things up, if you remember, we talked about the difference between a leader. A leader is somebody who sets the values, sets the purpose, and set the goals that other people have got to make changes in the business to achieve. So the leader is about the same. The managers are about making the changes. Now you might say, well, I haven't got a team and I haven't got any managers. Well, even if you're a solo entrepreneur in a business, you've still got to manage yourself. You've still got to manage your supply chain. You've still got to manage your resources. Okay. And this is no different. And we talked last week about making sure your team, your supply chain, the people who advise you, your bank, your accountants, they need to buy into those values. And the thing is with management is about managing change. It's making sure that you are doing what you need to do to change the behavior, change the way that the business looks at things, change the way that the business reacts, the way it behaves, the way it takes action, so that it continues to head towards its purpose, its values, and its goals. So that, as the manager's role, is the most important thing, to manage change and to look at those changes that are taking place. And I want you to start thinking, I want you to take some notes, I want you to write things down, and I want you to think about your own businesses. This is not just a learning workshop. I want you to actually start writing some notes down. And I want you, as I go through this next section, to think about what you need to change. What change do you need to manage in your business? If you remember right at the beginning, I mentioned that business is not going to be done the same. Behaviors are not going to be the same as they were before. We've already heard KFC in the way that they're changing their kitchens. I mean, you look at how small their kitchens are and how the environment that they work in. Things are going to change beyond this because the virus isn't going to go away in any time soon. So certain behaviors are going to be long-term, have a long-term impact on our business. So we've got to make sure that the changes that we make adapt our business to those outcomes from all of this. So it's about managing change. So I want you to think about, when you put the headset on, of what changes do you need to make in yourself? How are you going to manage change? How are you going to cope with change? How are you going to cope with uncertainty? Okay. And also, what changes need to happen in your business? What changes do you expect to see in your suppliers? What changes do you expect to see in your customers? How do you want them to work differently with you? How do you want them to communicate differently with you? Our meeting is going to take more place more regularly through Zoom or Skype or other platforms, of course, which are available. What other changes are going to take place in the way that you monitor your business? How do you look at your finances? How do you look at your key performance indicators? What needs to change? Okay, so effective team management is about how you are going to manage those changes. And it's also about how you're going to encourage other people, how you're going to communicate those changes to other people as well. Which leads me then very nicely on to the next slide, which has a couple of images on there. Change won't happen unless it starts from the leadership. Okay, so you have got to take some time to communicate not just what the same is, not just the direction that you're heading, but you need to communicate with yourself, if it's just you, with your team, if you have one, or with your suppliers and your customers, if not, and I'm sure we all have those. but you need to communicate. You need to use the correct language. You need to be careful of what you say. You need to plan how you're going to communicate, what you're going to communicate, to make sure that people understand that change is going to take place and that changes are needed so that the business can be more productive, more profitable, and make better use of resources, and become more efficient in the way that it delivers its products and services to the market and to its customers. So for you, is it something that you need to think about in your communication style? Is it something you need to think about in the planning of communications? You know, have you in the past just sort of shot from the hip and just gone into a team meeting and just, you know, winged it? Perhaps now you need to plan more about that. Perhaps you need to think about what you're going to say. Okay. The other thing that you need to do is show that you're there to help. You're there to support. Okay. If you are on your own, and I know some people in here are, or you're a small team, where can you go to get help to manage this change? Where can you go? Who can you communicate with? Who is going to help you cope with this change? So communicating outwardly is really important, making sure you're communicating the change and understanding that people need help. Yeah. I think I've mentioned this before, but if not, I'm going to mention it again anyway. People don't mind change. What they don't like is being changed. So if people are resisting, it's because they're feeling that they are being changed. So you've got to give them help. You've got to give them support. You've got to show them that you're there for a helping hand. Okay, and that's really important when we are managing a team, and we need to do that for ourselves as well. The other thing when it comes to team management and managing change is to look at resources that are available to us. Look at processes. Are there proven ways of doing things? I've put an image there of a great book. If you've not read it and you do any kind of process, any kind of development, Scrum, The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. And that's a very interesting title, and it's a very serious book. And Jeff Sutherland wrote the book Scrum initially, and has created a process. And some of you might have used Trello and Slack. Well, those products actually came from Jeff's co-creation of this model of Scrum some years back when he was working on a project for the FBI. But there are lots of proven, done for you, off-the-shelf processes that you can follow. And just because somebody else has done it, and I was talking to somebody the other day about R&D, research and development. When it comes to being productive, when it comes to managing change, I like a different interpretation of R&D: rip off and duplicate. Yeah, if somebody else has done it, why can't you duplicate it? Yeah, make it your own, tweak it, make it fit. But there are lots of tools, templates and resources that you can use, and now is the time to go out and find them. And what you need to do is find things that will make the team more efficient, more effective, communicate better, be more accountable, check in on progress regularly. We've talked about all this in previous sessions, KPIs, all of that fits in with what I'm talking about now. So find resources, find ways of doing it. Look at your systems, look at your processes. Now is the time to review it. Look at the impact that the last 3, 4, 5 weeks have had on you and your business. Even if it's been a good impact, it certainly is a time now to review, stand still. I mean, Neil, you've mentioned about leads and you've got new work coming in, but perhaps now take some time and realize that you have to catch your breath and work out what you need to do, what needs to change, and how can you make effective use of the team in managing that change. What can you do differently? What can you learn from what's happened over the last few weeks? And that's something I'm challenging everyone that I work with to do. Take a time, take some time to brainstorm and perhaps work with other people in your business, perhaps talk to advisors. Again, you can access some of this through the productivity program, through Paul and the other people at the team there, and find out what's available out there. What have you learnt, and what's available out there for you to use to become better at managing change? Because changes aren't just going to stop when lockdown finishes and it starts to come to an end. Changes of this are going to carry on for months and years to come. The other thing then is, when you're looking at team management, is that people resist change because they feel that it just means more hard work. And what you've got to do, if you're going to implement any kind of change, what you have to do is show that it's not hard work. It might be some initial hard work, get this change often need to do is make sure that we are in people that it's not out of work. Harder, longer, working longer hours, putting more effort into it. It's about working smarter, not harder. Neil's lost me there a little bit. Yep, sorry about that. I just saw it come up on the banner there. Is that okay? If you can put your hands up that you can hear me back okay? Yep, okay, good. Yep, thanks for that, Neil. That's really important. Let me know if you lose any sound or any visuals or anything like that, then that's useful to know. So thinking about team management, make sure you're communicating, make sure you're planning your communications, make sure you're choosing your language and your format. Is it appropriate to send people emails? Is it appropriate to meet face to face? Is it appropriate to issue memos? Is it appropriate to wing it as you go in? Show people that change is coming, change is important, change is vital. Show them the reason why. Look at the values, look at the purpose, look at the goals. Show them that the change is going to help them get to where the business and they ultimately want to be. Show them that you've got a helping hand. Use any done for you processes, systems, any kind of formats, templates, and take some time to learn from the last few weeks and try to work smarter, not harder. That is the ultimate aim of coming out of this. We don't want to be just working harder and harder and harder. What we need to do is take some time to work smarter, not harder. Really, really important to do that. When we are managing change, we have to understand that some of the people in our business, we talked about the leader of the business stepping up, but when we are managing change, to do is realize that there are superheroes there in the waiting, but we need to give them the opportunities to do that. We need to enable them. We need to tell them that they can step up. They can become the hero that they always wanted to be. So try and pick out those people. Don't try and force people to be heroes. I see a lot of businesses do this where they force people to take on supervisory roles or management roles when they're really good at what they're doing. And I did this many years ago. I made the mistake of promoting a decorator who was doing all of the supervision tasks, but he was doing it because he liked doing it. He didn't do it because it was his job. And I decided to reward him for it and give him the supervisor's bonus that all the other guys got that were supervisors. And as soon as he had the bonus, he hated it and he handed his notice within a week. And the reason he handed his notice in is he said that it just tied him up in knots. He didn't want the responsibility of having to do it. So make sure you're identifying the right people. Okay, and these are people that want to step up. These are people who want to be heroes. These are the people who want to do more. And what you need to do is you need to show them that, you know, this isn't magic. This isn't pulling a sword out of the stone as you see there. This is about planning. This is about working together. Okay, this is about enabling to have the skills, the time, the resources, and the help that they need to manage change. To recognize, as the leaders in the business, those that are leaders in the business, that managing change is the hard bit. You know, the leadership bit of setting the same, once you've done that, that's great. You know, you just got to keep communicating it and making sure the same message is coming out. But I see a lot of businesses, particularly larger businesses, where they destroy their managers because they just don't acknowledge the difficulties and the hardship and the resistance to change. Give your managers some slack. Give them the skills that they need. Give them the leadership that they need so that they can become the heroes. They can be really for this holy grail. I couldn't find an image of Holy Grail when I was searching iStock the other day. So the sword in the stone was the mythical thing that I could find. But yeah, we need to show them that we are there to help them find this hero's journey. Okay, that you're taking them on. So that's a little bit about effective team management. Take some time now, just for 30 seconds or so, to write down things that you need to do to manage change. Is it communicate better? Is it to show a helping hand? Is it to do what you said you were going to do last week and define your values and your purpose? Is it about researching other processes? And again, you are part of the productivity program. The people in the productivity program will have access to bundles and bundles and bundles of resources that can help you, resources that can help you. There are graduates that can help you put some of this stuff together. Okay. Is it about working smarter? Or are you actually expecting people just to work harder, not smarter? And who in your business, is it about identifying the people in the business who embrace change? Or is it about enabling them to become the superheroes in your business that are on that hero's journey to actually get that holy grail, that sword in the stone, change complete? So really important to write down some actions that you're going to take from that. Just adding Kate. Welcome, Kate. I got your message and email, so that's good.
Thank you.
So we've just been talking about effective team management and managing change. So I'm just getting people to reflect on the last few weeks and realize that business won't be the same. Business won't be as usual. So what do you need to do in your business to manage change and to direct that change and to make sure that people are embracing that change? That's what we've just been talking about. So I'm just encouraging every single one of you on the call right now to write something down. And as you're writing it down, put it in the questions and answers box. Tell us what you can do that is going to make a difference, what's going to be done in your business to manage change. Because I want you to take actions away from this webinar today, something you can do in the weeks ahead and before the next session. It also gives me a chance to get some honey and lemon and keep the throat going. If you want to share something, happy to take you on and share any. Now, I can't see you. I'm trusting that you're making notes. I'm trusting that you're doing things with what you need to do here. I'm sorry if you lost me a minute then. It just came up saying my internet connection was unstable. But I trust that you've written something down, something you can do momentous. It can be quite simple. It can be a small change. I do want to be honest with you all. If you make no change as we come out of this lockdown and as we start getting our businesses on track, and those of us that are those of us who are doing more, if we don't make changes to their business as usual, that people have got on funding as well. Improve, yeah, David's put there, improve mentoring of manager. Yeah, absolutely. Don't have an issue and find a structure and a way of doing that. I want to touch on one question that somebody asked who can't be on the call today, and it's quite an important question. And yeah, I'm happy to be contradicted on this if anybody knows anything different. But the question was that they have an employee who hasn't been with them very long, been with them since January. They came from the care sector as a manager. They have shut down completely, so they've asked this lady. But what has happened is previous employers have come to her and asked her if she would go in and do some work for them, because obviously the care industry is understaffed, under managed, so they've asked her to go in there and help with some of the management of and the how does that affect work else does a bit of this. And the general answer sort of was that, yeah, if you are their primary employer, then you have a responsibility to furlough them for your business, and you have a responsibility to make sure that they're not any foils, as we've talked about. If they are working for somebody, they'll keep them on furlough, and they can go out and do work, as far as I understand, for somebody else, volunteering, etc. But if they're paid for it, as long as it is not an equal to or greater than amount of work than they would not do on shifts, then that you can look at that you're the working time directive. Yeah, it's your role as a primary employer to make sure that things are being complied with and that you're monitoring the situation. But yeah, it's when that shift between being a private employer or not, that's when you have to do something about it. So I hope for the person who's watching the recording that helps. And if anybody has anything different to say on that, I know sometimes we have Kate HR who might be able to give some alternative tips on that. Neil has put in here, remote working has been positive. Not being physically sited together has not caused issues for communication, sharing or feedback, which is great, but has thrown up some questions about being the most effective and seamless ways of sharing and backing up the large asset files we create. We're talking tens of gigabytes per day, and we're collaborating on these projects, so need constant back and forth. Neil, do you want to just come off with mute if you want to just tell us a little bit more about that? And obviously happy to discuss that and bounce that around with you a little bit as well.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, so obviously we mostly what we're doing is making things. We're making animation and video, and so our backing up system has kind of been always been based on double backing things up and working on individual drives that we each have, and then we back up, regularly. But obviously, not being physically located, I can't back my files up from this person and this person. We're not on a network. In when we're working away, and whilst we've got individual drives, which meant we were able to kind of break kind of camp and go to our remote places quite easily, it does kind of throw up some issues for, if this is going to be a long-term solution, how we back up and ensure data security, well, not so much security, but kind of just make sure everything's backed up and safe, and we have kind of I suppose continuity in that regard. So that's just something that's cropped up. Really, we've not really had to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've found the same issue. So I use Google Drive quite a bit
which we
to share files with clients, and I find it really good for collaborating. Sorry, but even then, I found a couple of files that people have worked on, and they've worked offline, and then they haven't been synchronized back properly. But I've had to increase my Google storage. Most of my stuff that I use personally, because everything's Mac, I use iCloud, so I keep most of my stuff on there. To go increasing storage levels, even videos. I upload my videos to Vimeo, and I only have a certain amount of storage each week to upload, and I'm hitting 79, 80%, 99% of that on a regular basis. I'm resisting increasing that at the moment, but I think there's the element of storage. But what a lot of people don't realize, and I know Jay probably talked about this in his cybersecurity, is that a lot of these cloud-based platforms, such as Paul just mentioned, Dropbox there, Google, places like, what a lot of them don't do is they don't do backups. And you think it's down the cloud, but if ever you stop paying and you ignore any reminders, or you don't see any reminders, I've got a client who has a third party who pays for their Google for them, and they stopped paying, and they instantly, their whole thing was taken down and they couldn't get it back. So you're right, you've got to find more communal places to store, and OneDrive, Dropbox, Google, and there's lots and lots more, iCloud, etc. But it's making sure you've got the right amount of storage, and that you've got it backed up as well.
It's just the quite messy solutions, really, aren't they? It's kind of piecemeal. It's like, I've got to go physically back that up and send it to that person. That person's got to physically go and find those files and download them. It's like we can be connected on all these kind of things on Dropbox, or we use Hightail as well. We use Google Drive. We use lots of different things. But we tried to do a cloud-based backup system years ago, and literally it never scratched the surface. We've got, I've just got sat on my desk here, I've got 20 terabytes plugged into my computer. So I can't really back that up online very easily when we're working remotely. It's not you can make proxies and things like that, but you still got to back up the original files, otherwise that's the kind of core data gone. So it's a challenge.
It is, and it's not just backing it up, and I'm sure, I don't think Diana's on this call, but one of the things I've found over the years, it's restoring it. That's interesting. How many times does the backup actually get tested that the backup actually works? I go back to the days when I used to have a little tape drives that used to be in the server in the office, and every single time we blue screened and the server needed restoring, we said, that's okay, we've got a backup tape from last night, we haven't done too much on it, and that tape would never ever work. I don't think I've ever had a successful backup from anything, although I must admit the iCloud time capsules and all the Mac stuff, that is one thing that has always worked for me. But you've got to find that reliability of restore as well. You mentioned continuity. I think there's two things I would add to what you just said there, and this is about change. You need a continuity plan, some kind of what would happen in the event of type scenario. We'll talk about that a little bit next. But I think the other thing is looking at document control and process control. And that's why I mentioned the Scrum book there. It's making sure that everybody does it within the confines of a set way of doing it. And it's not about being anal about it and saying, you've got to do it exactly this way. And that might not be the way that you do business. Some it might be, but it's, everybody should have a flow chart, some kind of process, which they're pretty confident that people are following. And things like data control, document control, backups, where do they find things? Where do they go? So if somebody didn't know, is there somewhere they can refer back to that tells them that? Is there a guideline somewhere that tells them where they should store storage? I've seen this with a company who did digital transformation about 2 years ago, and it all fell apart. They spent tens of thousands of pounds on it, and it all fell apart because they never actually told people how to store their documents. They were all given strange file names. Some people put things in folders. Some people preferred it just in OneDrive. It's having that consistency and having people following that process. And when things are in a state of flux and a state of change, that's really important to revisit that and look at that and say, okay, actually, is the way that we're doing it a good way? Mm-hmm. Can we do it a smarter way? So yeah, really important. Thanks, Paul, for reminding us about Dropbox. Is there anything else you wanted to mention, Neil, or ask about change or about some of the things that you mentioned in that comment there?
No, I think that was the biggest challenge, really. I think in terms of, we had systems and processes in place to ensure that. So, for example, one of our kind of best assets is our photo library, and that would have a kind of weekly. We would kind of take a drive off site and put it somewhere else and update that one and do that sort of thing. But when you're not moving from location to location like we are at the moment, you're just sat in the same place and not really supposed to be going anywhere. Kind of doing that off-site backup thing is a challenge. So so it's just something we need to explore at the moment.
There's one thing I didn't mention, and I don't know if you use it or not, and I'm sure there's quite a few people on this call do, but Amazon S3, sort of AWS.
No, I don't know that. No.
I create a huge amount of videos over the years, and I hate to think I've probably got 3,500, 4,000 videos, and they're all on different websites and different places. So where they're located is different, but they always come from a core repository on Amazon. I use S3. There's all different versions of it. A lot of web designers use it. And the good thing with it is you create buckets and the data really, really cost effective. I've just mentioned all that. I can't remember how much data storage I have on it, but it cost me about £4 a month.
Okay.
And compared to Dropbox, it's not quite the easy access that you would expect. But for example, all my websites, web designers use it to back up website files because you take a complete picture of everything and just dump it into Amazon S3. And that works really, really well. And it's not something where you'd access it every day, but all my websites, and I've got about 4 or 5 websites, are all automatically backed up into Amazon because the size of I use Dropbox, Google, something like that. So that's what's worth having a look at.
I will do. Thank you. Thanks, Al.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Neil, for that. Moving on to what we just touched on there about continuity plans and plans A, B, C, D, etc. One of the things that I would remind you of, and I don't know if everybody's seen it, but Men in Black, I'm pretty sure it was Men in Black. There is one of their films is about a guy who wears a woolly hat. Sees different versions of the future. He's always and what the effect that has on the future. And he will often say in the film, that's because we're going on that future line or that timeline. And it made me think about having other plans, and quite a few people that I mentioned earlier on that have been turned down for funding, etc. that I don't work with, but a lot of them only have one plan. They only have a plan A. And when they only have a plan A and it gets crushed, then there is no other way out. And whilst I don't want people having lots of distractions and lots of other things, but what we often have to do is look at alternatives. So it's not about having completely different plans, but it's about just looking at alternatives. If this happened, what would our plan be? And I think, again, using the word flow charts that I mentioned just a second ago, and I use a lot of flow charts in my business, and there's you come up with these little decision diamonds, and decision diamonds basically say if somebody gets to this point and they have a choice of yes or no, which way do I go depending upon the choice that they make? And I think right now, one of the things that you ought to be doing is having those kind of decision points identified in your plans. And then it might not be a completely different plan, but it's a plan that then would run alongside as an alternative. And it's a signpost says this way, that way, the other way. Okay. And it doesn't have to be a completely different plan to plan A. It can just be a different, better version of plan A. So the core elements of the plan would be the same, but there might just be one thing that would need to be different because of a different outcome, a different solution or different answer that comes out of that. And I think continuity plans are really important for that, because what you are doing with continuity plans and disaster recovery plans, whatever you want to call them, is that you're looking at alternative consequences from the present actions that are taken or things that are imposed upon you, that you have to say, okay, if we were to have a fire, what would happen? If we were to be robbed in our office and it was stripped clean, what would happen? I think we all know now how we would deal with a pandemic. We would never have thought about this some time ago, but a lot of businesses were planning, not necessarily for a pandemic, but they certainly were planning for this kind of interruption. And the other thing is, sometimes it's about looking at reserves, it's about looking at resources that you can have just set aside that might, again, not be a completely different plan, but plan A with a reserve list. So it might be, yes, this is our plan A, but we need to make sure, should something happen, that we've got a cash reserve for 3 months. Or we've got an amount of cash put to one side for our taxes. A lot of people are deferring their VAT and their PAYE until March 2021. Well, that's okay. And we might have a plan A of what we do with that. But how do we make sure we incorporate those taxes and those VAT payments into that plan? How do we assume how we're going to deal with those finances? So I want you all to think about the plans that you've perhaps thought about. Some of you I know have already started working on your plans. A couple of you on here are clients already, and I know Alan from Evans McDowell, we worked on your plan last week. What do you need to do? What sort of slight tweaks could you make where you've either got a plan A+1, A+2, or even okay, well, if it's that way, if we get that, but it's that way if we don't. By Goding the dip, when to stick and when to quit. And what he talks about is that sometimes we push are in existence because they had a plan A, they realized when it was time to quit. Just wait for my internet to get back up. So they had a plan A, they realized when it was time to quit, and then they went with plan B. So sometimes we have to know when to stick with a plan, or we need to know when to quit a plan, perhaps backtrack a little bit, or even go on to a different plan altogether. So what different plans do you need? What could be the consequences? Again, picking up on what Neil said about continuity, what kind of consequences could you need to consider when creating different alternatives of plan? It might be access to finance. It might be that next project that doesn't come in. It might be, I'm amazed how many people are being furloughed that actually are out there looking for alternative employment. So the employer's doing right by them, they're furloughing them, they're paying them 80% of their wages or 100% of their wages, but then the employer isn't sure that that employee is going to come back to them, because there's quite a few employees out there that are seeing this same opportunity for changing their lives, and they might not even come back to work. The items that you would need in continuity plans, your disaster recovery plans, or your different versions of the plan to move forward. Have a think about that right now. And of course, plan B, as it says there on the image, can be another way to make plan A work. It doesn't have to be a complete different change in direction. It could be a tweak. It could be a slight variance that allows you then to refocus on plan A and make sure that plan A works. So what do you need to do planning your business? Take a moment now and just write some things down. What consequences do you need to consider? Be realistic with yourself. This isn't about being pessimistic. Yeah, we want to be optimistic. We want to be realistic. And plan A perhaps is our or even a pessimistic plan. It's a lot with the banks, where people have put their business plans forward, they've put their cash flow forecast forward, and quite a few of the banks have come back and said, yeah, that's okay, but what if this doesn't work? Don't you think you're being too pessimistic? I've had people that have complained that the plans are too pessimistic and we don't think you need as much money as you do. And we've had other people that have done plans and we said, we think you're too optimistic. So sometimes people need to see different versions of a plan. Those different versions of the timeline, as that guy in Men in Black with the woolly hat says, oh yeah, this was a consequence that happened now, and I can now see that is the one that made the difference to the timeline in the future. None of us can tell the future, none of us can predict the future, but what we can do is we can plan for different futures. We can plan for different outcomes of how we would react to tomorrow, because tomorrow is just a different present. Today we're in the present of today, and tomorrow we'll be in the present of tomorrow. So what do we need to cope with when we do that? What could come up? So have a think about that. Jot some things down. What can you do to tweak your plans? What can you add to your plans to make them more beneficial? Okay, we've just about done an hour now. Happy to answer any questions on latest business funding available. There have been changes, obviously, to furlough in extending the period that you can carry it on for new employees that are now covered by it. The the coronavirus business interruption loan scheme is changing. Any questions on that? Any questions on change? Any questions on having plans B? How does that feel? What kind of message does it send, perhaps, to have a plan B? And I think that's one of the fears that people have, that if I've got a plan A, am I admitting defeat by having a plan B? Now, only you know the answer to that. My advice would always be, to look at it, and yeah, as long as them result in a win, then you're not admitting defeat in it anyway. But you do have to know when to keep pushing on with the plan, and you do have to set lines in the sand that say, you know what, I'm just going to get to that line of sand, and once I get to that line of sand, I'm going to ditch plan A and I'm going to go to plan A+1 or plan B. So any questions around that, or any questions around what is happening out there in the world around us? If you haven't started planning yet, then you need to, and you need to at least come up with your plan A. And of course, we've talked about strategic plans, which are longer term plans, and we've talked about the ways that we can bring those down into quarterly plans, and plans actually for this week, plans for the next 2 weeks, and plans for next month. And it's really difficult. You know, somebody mentioned to me, oh, how on earth can I plan when I don't know what work I'm going to have next week or the week after? But again, it's about planning for the different versions of the future. Okay, so let's have a plan for if I get no work next week. Let's have a plan if I get, you know, mediocre part of work this next week. Let's have a plan for if I get back to normal next week, or you know, if it's exceeding those plans. You know, I've got a guy who delivers parcels who's having his best month still yet this month. It's just exploding in the way that he's doing things, and he's not an Amazon driver or anything like that, but he's doing a huge amount of deliveries at the moment. So his plan is actually for growth. If I get this amount of work in over and above, if I hit 50% of 150% of my target, what will it look like? If I hit 200% of my target, what will it look like? So any questions on that, please type into that. If there's anything that you want to tell us that you've planned, any continuity plans, I think Jay is still on here. I'd be interested, Jay, if you've got any comments on continuity plans, because I know that's something that you work with or talk about. If you do want to talk about that, just take yourself off mute and chip in and add anything to that. That would be great to do. If I get silenced, I'll assume that you've either all fallen to sleep, or whether you're all frantically writing, trying to think of things that you need to do differently and things that you need to plan differently, and that all your questions are being answered. I know we're probably in a state of stability when it comes to change in requirements, legislation. But any questions, happy to answer them. If not, I'm going to give it 10 seconds more. If nothing typed in, then we'll move on to the next section. Just get a sip of honey and lemon. Okay, no questions, nothing in the chat box. So we'll move on to the next item, and that is about planning productivity and efficiency. We should be taking time now to think about and contemplate how we can do more with the resources we've got, or how we can do more with less. You know, what can we cut? I've had people who are looking to change completely to working remotely, and they're probably going to move out of the office that they're in. And probably, I've got one client who is thinking about moving from their quite large office and taking up tenancy at Lincoln University in Sparkhouse Enterprise, and put more staff that distantly, remotely. And they've realized, you know, the different ways of working. So how can we do more with less, or how can we really squeeze more efficiency and more productivity out of what we've already got? And as we think about that, first thing we've got to do is go back to, do we know our figures? Do we understand our productivity and our efficiency? Do you know what the figures were before this crisis? Do you know what the figures are now? Do you know how productive your team are when they're working remotely? Do you know how productive they were before? Because a lot of people are saying that they don't think their team has been as productive, but actually they've got no measure of how productive they were before. So some people are having to go back and look at their figures what were the levels of productivity before. So we have to, first of all, if we're going to make a plan of how we're going to improve productivity and efficiency, what we've got to know is where we are right now. Okay? That's like putting a destination into a sat-nav system in the car, and the car doesn't know where it's starting from. It would be ridiculous. It'd be insane to even think that you would expect it to calculate the journey time and the destination, the route to that destination, without actually knowing where you are. So the first thing that we need to do is do a list of items that we want to increase productivity, we want to increase efficiency. We need to do a list of those items. So we start thinking about that now. Get your flip chart out, as the guys over on the right hand side, and start doing a list of the things that you can improve on, and then determine. There's an interesting question now. I'll come to that in a minute. Then I want you to determine what is that benchmark, what is that starting point from where you're going to take a measure. Where are you right now? Okay. And if you don't know the metrics to that, if you don't have a gut feel, and it doesn't have to be always numbers and figures and finances. Sometimes it can be, a smiley face to a frowny face. How do I feel that we are on that? Do I feel that we're somewhere mediocre in between? Do I feel that we're really unhappy? Do I feel that we're happy with it? Okay. So don't get too hung up. Measure where you are now, but as long as you can have some kind of indication, some kind of gauge of where you are right now. Of course, then what we need to do is we need to look at productivity and efficiency and put a plan in place. That's where we need to start. We need to put a plan of what actions are we going to take. How are we going to check that we're staying on track? Okay, and we need to do things differently. We need to think about what changes we can make. We need to think about what we can do the same. What shouldn't be changed. Planning productivity and efficiency is great, but actually, if there's some things that are really working and working well, and we measure it and we review it and we decide, and this is what it's about, making better decisions. If we decide that we shouldn't change it and we should actually do more of it, or just keep it the same, then that's not a problem. But let's plan to do that. Yes, of plan, do, act, and check. So take a minute now and just write down as many things as you can that you feel that you could improve the productivity of or the efficiency of in your business. Write down as many as you can. Thanks, Kate. Kate's put here, we've got a real problem with over-servicing clients. My staff are over. Both of those in a minute, if that's okay. But yeah, I really like where you're going with those two things. So that's good. Now, there are lots of ways that we can look at how we're going to be more productive and more efficient. Heard of lean manufacturing, Sigma 6, a lot of the is manufacturing, and we think about it very much in process driven sort of work environments. And I remember challenging a guy who did some networking with me, Steve Lipscomb, and he was very much into Sigma 6, Kaizen, and all that kind of thing. And I said, I don't really get involved in that. I don't particularly like it. I don't see the point of it. And he got me to stand in the kitchen and make a cup of tea. He said, I want you to think about how many times you move around your kitchen. How many different cupboards do you have to open? How much time do you spend walking back to the same part of the kitchen because the milk wasn't in a cupboard opposite where where are the tea bags, where of a cooker. And he got me to go through, and this is one of the exercises that he got us all to do, very simply. Look at the way that you make a cup of tea and decide how you could make the same cup of tea with less movement around your kitchen. And that was quite a moment of blinding flash of the obvious, really, that you don't have to be manufacturing, you don't have construction or process driven. Sometimes we can look at some of the simplest tasks and how we do things, where things are located. Neil was talking earlier on about the amount of time that I see people wasting looking for files, trying to find files. And I said, just search for it. Just put the name of the file in the search and find it. Oh, I didn't realize it was called that. Well, they didn't realize it was called that because actually there was no plan in place for naming the files in a certain way. So have a think about how you can, in all aspects of your business, if you're in a physical office and people take lunch breaks, how do they take those breaks? How easy is it for them to get from the place of work and back to the place of work? Have a think about all aspects of your business. How can you improve productivity and efficiency? And the very simple question is, what are you doing to make things better? And productivity and efficiency very often can be the way people feel about it. It's whatever better means to you. Okay, if people are happier doing things in a different way, if people feel more comfortable, more confident, there's less checking. Okay, so what can you do to make things better? What kind of process? Is it a lean process? Is it wastage? How much wastage do you produce? And that can be physical wastage. I see a lot of businesses make significant savings just on the way that they handle their waste, their energy. Now, I want to go to Neil's question first, if that's okay, Kate. Curveball. Maybe interested in your thoughts on planning unproductivity. So again, I'm going to ask Neil just to come off his mute. Tell me what you're thinking of with unproductivity, because I think that's
so I mean, essentially, obviously, is where kind of creative people
values.
Oh, sorry, I keep losing you there.
Yeah. That's okay. Carry on.
So as I was at I was filming an event 3-4 years ago when there was a guy talking, and he was talking about unproductivity and how with the race for productivity and those moments of unpredictiveness, which actually sometimes throw up kind of gems and I suppose unexpected ideas and things like that, and experimentation, they get lost, and then innovation disappears. Obviously, there's innovation in becoming productive, but there's also innovation kind of inherent in those moments where you're not being productive. So I just wondered about that really, because with what we do, we're kind of developing creative ideas, we're creatively responding to briefs for clients, and quite a lot of it is just kind of putting some time aside with no agenda in place, but to just kind of explore an idea and to draw and to sketch and to do everything that you need to do to try and explore that idea. So I just wondered how we kind of try and bring that into our creative process, but it's also about bringing that into our kind of work plan and work process. So I just wondered what your thoughts were on the concept of unproductiveness and the benefits of it.
Yep. You've put I think unplanned unproductivity is not healthy for a business. So people that are unproductive without giving them the boundaries, without giving them permission to do that, without planning the time to be unproductive, unplanned unproductivity for me is very destructive. Planned unproductivity is really important. And, it's that old cliche of working on the business, not in the business. So you need to plan downtime. You need to plan time and be free flowing. When I used to go on a training course in my construction business, and I'd go away on a training course for a day or a couple of days, all my team knew when I came back that there were going to be lots and lots of changes to take place, because I would think more freely, I'd think more creatively. I'd work completely differently and come back with all these amazing things we were going to do. So what I used to do is make sure that I had 4 events where my mind would be stimulated and educated, but it would also encourage me to be away from the business, to be in a state of that was planned and taken out of the business. There's a great book that's what I was just looking over my shoulder for, Work Rules by Laszlo Bock there. I'm just conscious my internet seemed to go down again. But that is a great book that talks about being unproductive. Google didn't with who actually encourage people to work on themselves more, but it's got to be planned. So planned unproductivity is really, really useful, and that's a great book that talks about culture. Work Rules by Laszlo Bock, and he was the HR guy at Google right from the beginning. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a sort of answer to that and thoughts on that. It's okay if it's planned. If people are being unproductive and they are doing things creatively, try and bring it back into some kind of plan or some kind of structure, because all of this should help you move forward with your plan. Every decision needs to be taken to help you get to where you want to be, and unproductivity can be that. It can get you to where you want to be, but it has to be done against that plan. So hopefully that's helped with that, Neil, a little bit.
Yeah. I think
encourage it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think with us, we've kind of found that there's certain points, like the start of a project, where you need that time to just kind of, just play really and to understand. But sometimes it's quite hard for like some of the team members, or especially new team members, to when we take somebody new on, to say, look, you've actually got a week just to mess around here and just to kind of get your head around this project and understand things. And then they're kind of coming to you and being like really kind of concerned about it. It's like, well, if we look at stuff at the end of the day and we can feedback and then add into that and then go from there. But yeah, it's sometimes it's quite a bit of a culture shift. So it's kind of, it's something that I really believe in. So yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. And I think, Neil, the key there is if somebody comes and they're a new starter and you give them that week and you give them permission, which is great, one of the reasons they'll be panicking is because you probably haven't quite done 2 things: explained the why behind it, and also showed them how it fits with your plan. If people understand how what they're doing, no matter what it is, whether it's being unproductive, what you need to show people is the purpose and the reason behind it, but also how it will help the business get to where it wants to be. And if they see it fits with the bigger plan, then they're more likely to be accepting of it and not so worried about it. So definitely just have a think about that when you're communicating that to them.
All right, brilliant. Thank you.
Kate, over-servicing clients, this is with mute there, Kate, that'd be good. I think accountants, anybody, marketing agencies, coaches, I include myself in that. We all have a habit of over-servicing and over-delivering on clients. And one of the ways that I always look at it is I set something called an effective billable rate. So I know what I want to be able to charge for the time that I put into something. So I'll give an example. I asked an accountant to do this when I first started working with them, when I first started coaching. And I asked him what his hourly rate was. And I'm going back to 2009 now. And he said, I don't do any work for less than £50 an hour. Okay. So, right, good. Okay, £50 an hour. But you're saying you're struggling to take new clients on. You feel that you aren't making the profit levels and the income got people to check sheets, and we put it all together. And when we worked out what he was quoting to clients and how many hours he was putting into each individual client, as a business, his overall average billable rate was £7 an hour. So this is a guy who sat there saying doesn't do anything for less than £50 an hour, yet he allowed his team and himself to overservice clients to the point where it was reducing their billable rate to £7 an hour. And I think people want to do the best for their clients, but very often I find overservicing clients doesn't actually do that. Because what you're doing is you're setting the expectations, and you're setting the way that they will judge the service at a high level, where they're more likely to become despondent. They're more likely to become disappointed they're receiving, because the expectations are too high. They expect everybody just to drop it at a hat. And I used to have a contracts manager who, when a housing company would ring up and they would say, "Oh, can we have somebody to do some work this afternoon?" His first answer would be, as you said there, Kate, rather than saying no, he didn't want to say no. So what he said was yes, straight away. But then that became the expectation. And when then he tried to get somebody to go out and he let them down and he didn't do it till the following morning, or he did it really late, we then were at the sharp end of abuse for not doing what was expected. So what I had to explain to Eric is it's not about saying no, and it's not about saying yes. It's about saying either not now or I'll take a look. So I used to literally get him to say, "Okay, just let me have a look at my calendar. I'll see what we can do and I'll get back to you." And he literally would sit there at his desk, do nothing for 3-4 minutes. And then he'd ring them back and say, "I've had a look at my calendar, I've shuffled things around, and yes, we can get to it this afternoon." But it was about setting the client's expectation that every time they asked, they didn't get a yes. So sometimes it's not about saying no, it's about finding different ways of saying not now, or let me think about it, let me take a look at it. Because if they feel that you're putting the effort into it, then they're more likely to respond to it. Now, the other reason that Eric, the contracts manager, did that, I said to him, if you shuffle people round, if you give somebody some over-servicing, then I want it to be in exchange for something. So next time this person rings you up and you say yes, say, "Yeah, we can move things around, but I don't suppose you could do me a favour, could you? We've got an invoice that's due from your accounts departments tomorrow. I don't suppose you could just have a word with the accounts and just make sure it's on the pay run, could you?" Or it might be, "We're waiting for some materials to come from your head office. You couldn't just perhaps have a word with procurement and just get them pushed along a little bit." So usually the over-servicing was, one, it was never immediate in the answer of yes, but two, it was always in exchange for something else. And some of that didn't really have much value, but it almost always felt that the over-delivery, the over-servicing had a value, because if you just say yes to everything and you just over-service the standard, then it has no value. So I don't know if that answers a little bit of that question, Kate. I see you taking yourself off mute, so I'll stop talking.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, that gives me some good ideas.
What do you think you could give in exchange for anything that you might over deliver on, or how do you think you could track and measure that over?
Well, a lot of our clients are on
delivery.
Sorry, the internet's really bad today, but a lot of our clients are on a retainer, and that's to do an agreed amount of work per month. However, sometimes contracts are front loaded, so you might do more work at the beginning and then it dies down a bit. And we always say, as long as over a 6-month period it averages out at the right number of hours, that's okay. But then we've had clients where we've done a lot of work up front, and then suddenly after 6 months they say, okay, we're really busy now, thanks a lot for your services, we don't need you anymore. And then you think, oh damn, we've done double the amount of hours for you that you actually paid for.
Yeah.
Or
and I think
we just have clients who they're paying a reasonable amount anyway, and I don't think they could pay any more, but we're doing more work than they're paying for, even though they're paying a significant amount. And we try and say to them, we're going to have to give you some of this work back, or we're going to have to charge you extra because we're constantly doing over the allocated number of hours. They just constantly tease us about going to our competitors. Or
and I think it's back to the values, isn't it? Are these clients that you want to work with? Point one, do they value what you do? And if you can give them some kind of exchange and say, of course we can do that, but in exchange we want this, then that starts to add value to the over delivery. It makes them realize that it shouldn't be an expectation. So I think there's two things, Kate, that you need to do. I think you need to be certainly measuring and monitoring what that billable rate is on a more regular basis, so that everybody knows and understands the consequences of it. And two, it's about making better decisions. So sometimes you will want to decide to do that extra work, but it should be a decision, not the norm. It shouldn't be something that is just done as standard and as a reaction. It should be done based upon a decision. And we used to have a level where any guy on site could do anything up to 30 minutes, as long as it was 30 minutes and it could be done in the same day and finished the same day. And that was their remit. They could do that. Anything above that had to come back to the office for a decision to be made. And sometimes it's about setting those standards. Once you're measuring how over servicing you are and what kind of effect that's having you on your rate. Because sometimes when you imagine that accountant, £7 an hour, that was a lot less than he was paying that were delivering the accounts. And he couldn't work out why. So measure it more and make better decisions and have a process of making those decisions on how you do it. And it might be we make those decisions by giving ourselves time to do it, or we make decisions based upon the client, etc. But I think the final and most important thing is, and it's not a sort of an action as such, but one of the issues is that people aren't seeing the value in what you're doing. And if they're threatening to go to competitors, I would never do that with anybody that I value. So I think you need to look and see how their perception is of the value that you offer, because you need to improve on that, definitely. So hopefully that's answered that question. Another question here: we have our retainer jobs we measure, but also have agreed deployment rate in the contract, so cannot without prior agreement use more or less than the stated amount. So yes, sometimes it can be in your T's and C's. Sometimes you can give people reports of time so that people can see when you're over delivering or under delivering. Certainly on retainer clients, that's something. A lot of people don't want to show that they've not taken as many hours as they should have done because perhaps they've not received the work, etc. So that's always a difficult one, how it does that. But certainly, again, there's nothing wrong with saying, I can do that. But on this occasion, that is outside of our hours, so that is going to have to be an extra charge. And if people value it, they'll go with it. If they don't value it, then that's a different decision that you've got to make. Okay. So planning productivity, planning efficiency, looking at the things we've talked about over delivering, over servicing is really important. If you've got any final questions, we've got a few minutes left. Happy to answer them. Put those in there. I'll just put the contact information on there as well. If you do want to get in touch with the productivity program to find out what for you moving forward, then that is something obviously you can get in touch with them. I'm going to encourage you to get in touch with them and find out what's available, and at least get some kind of review done there as well. And next week is the last week of my series. There are other webinars going on marketing and other things as well. If there is anything that you do want the productivity to deliver on, you with the topics that you want. And any final questions? You're right, Kate, today has been a real bad day for internet. I keep seeing it flash up all the time. My internet connection is unstable, but some things we can do something about, some things we can't. Be interested to see what the recording looks like after this. Okay, if there's no if there are any specific topics that you want me to cover next week, happy to do that. We will be doing a recap of what we've covered. So we will be looking at actions. We will be making sure that you've got something to take away from this 6-week series. So there's going to be more accountability for everyone to say what you're going to do differently, what you're going to do extra, what you're not going to do as well. And we'll work on that as well. So it's been an absolute pleasure, as always, to have you on this. Thank you again to the University of Lincoln and the ERDF for supporting this. Thanks to Kate and the team at Shooting Star as well for promoting these. And I know they're doing a great job of promoting the other webinars as well, which is shown by the registrations that are out there for those. And have a great week. And have a great week. Stay healthy. And of course, for the time being, until we're told otherwise, probably until the middle of May, we hope, stay at home. Speak to you all soon. Bye for now.